When you are working on business problem, sometimes you might have to write a logic which would be needed again and again throughout your project. In such cases, it's better to put that logic within functions and then use those functions whenever you want to solve that problem. In this way, you can optimize your code. Hi, my name is Rohit, and in today's video, we would cover how you can use Python for writing functions. Let's get started. So in Python, you can write functions using a def keyword. Suppose I am writing a simple function for printing a message, then I can write def, then the name of my function, print message, followed by two brackets and a colon, and after that whichever operations I want to do within this function. So here I am doing only the print operation, so I am writing print this message to output, and then once you write this logic, right, you can use it again and again. So this is called as function definition. Then you can use a function call to execute operations which are written within this function. So for example, here I am calling the function print message, just using this print message and then two circular brackets, and after that if I run this, I would get this message, printing this message to output. So this is called as function call, where we are just calling the function and using it or executing it. And this is called as function definition, where we are creating a function and defining the logic within the function. So this was simple example. Now you can also pass arguments or parameters to the function. So here within the brackets, if you want to pass any arguments or parameters, that is possible as well. Now suppose you want to create a function for adding two numbers, then obviously you need to know which two numbers to be added, right? So suppose let's create a function, again def add numbers, this is the function name, and then after that two numbers which we want to add, so number 1 and number 2. So these are the parameters which we are passing to the function, and then within function we are doing the addition operation. So result is equal to number 1 plus number 2, and then we are printing sum of two numbers each and the result. So this is the function definition for adding two numbers. Now how we can call this function? We can simply say add numbers, and within that we can just pass the numbers which we want to add. So here I am passing 10 and 7. So that would result in addition of 10 and 7, and the result would be 17. So that's why if we execute this function, we would get the result as 17. Now this function expects that it would get two arguments, right, within the function call. Suppose you create a function call now, but you don't pass any arguments, right? If you don't pass any numbers, then this won't work. You would get an error that there are two requirement positional arguments, but there is nothing passed basically, right? So always remember that if you are creating a function with arguments or parameters, you would have to pass those parameters while calling that function, because if you don't do that, how a function would know in this case which numbers to be added? Then you can also define default values for these arguments, right? So in some cases you might have a requirement where if user doesn't pass anything or a function caller doesn't pass anything, you can take default values. So in this case, suppose again I am creating a function add numbers, but here for the function arguments or parameters, I am defining default value. So number 1 is equal to 1 and number 2 is equal to 19. So these default values are useful when user doesn't pass anything. So suppose now again we want to create a same function call. So we are calling a same function again, and here now we are passing values 10 and 7. So if a function caller is passing some values over here, then it would overwrite the default values. So then obviously default values won't be used. Whatever we are passing here would be used within function. So that's why 10 plus 7, again we are getting 17. But if while doing a function call, if you don't pass any numbers, right, if you don't pass any arguments, then that function would use the default values for those arguments. So here again I am calling a function add numbers, but I am not passing any arguments. So in this case, the function would use default values. That's why we would get 1 plus 19 is equal to 20, and the result that we would get would be 20. So this is how you can also define default parameters in your function definition. Then you can also return the value which you are getting after doing the calculations. So in this case, suppose you want to add two numbers, number 1 and number 2, and after addition, if you return the result, okay, then that return result would come to the place from where you are calling the function. So here we called function add numbers and we passed two numbers 100 and 50. So it would come here first. So number 1 would be set to 100, number 2 would be set to 50. Then here we would get 100 plus 50, 150. Result variable would have value 150. And when we do return result, that value 150 would be returned over here, and that would be then set to the total variable. So that's why the value of total would be now 150. And then obviously if we then print the results, then we would get the result as 150. So this is called as a return statement. So that is used for returning the results in a particular variable to the place from where we are calling the function. We can also return multiple values. So here suppose we write a function for adding and multiplying a numbers. So the values it is getting as arguments is number 1 and number 2, and within function we are doing addition operation followed by a multiplication operation, and then we are returning result for addition as well as for multiplication. Okay, so in this case this function is returning two values. So obviously then when we call this function, we'll have to pass the arguments or parameters which are required for this function, and then after doing these operations this function would return these two values. That's why we need two variables on the left side here to assign these two returned values. So add would be returned to addition and multi would be returned to multiplication. So this is how we are able to get the result of addition and multiplication in these two variables, and then we are just printing that result over here. So on the left side you should have number of variables equal to number of values returned by the function. So here function is returning two values, that's why we have two variables to the left so that we can set those values to those variables. So this is how you can also return multiple values from the Python function. Then in Python or in any programming language there is a concept called as a recursive function. Now what is recursive function? Recursive function is a function which calls itself. So sometimes you might have to write a logic where you have to kind of call that function again and again to get your work done. So in that case recursive function is really useful because then your logic becomes really simple. So for example, if you want to create a logic, right, for adding all the numbers up to the certain number. So suppose you want to write a logic for adding all the numbers from 1 to 10, right? Now for doing that, right, you might have to write a for loop and then create numbers, or you can simply write say result is equal to 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus up to 10, right? Now this sounds simpler, right? But suppose you want to add all the numbers starting from 1 to 1000, right? Then it becomes a difficult task in order to write those additional numbers one by one, right, manually. So instead of that, you can simply create a recursive function which does this automatically by working in recursion. Now let's take an example of adding numbers from say 1 to 10. So we are writing a function called as add positive number, and in that we are expecting one argument which is k. So that would tell our function up to which numbers we want to add the numbers. Suppose here we are passing k is equal to 10. So we want the function to add all the numbers from 1 to 10. Okay. Now let's do it here. So first time when we call this function add positive number k is equal to 10, it would come here, because if k is greater than 0, it has to get into this block. So k would be 10, so that's why it would come here. It would first print the message k is 10, so that's why we are getting k is 10. Then it would go to the next line. Here we are doing result is equal to k plus add positive number k minus 1. So we are doing result is equal to k, so k would be 10, that's why it would be 10 plus add positive number 10 minus 1, that is 9. So we are again calling the same function, but this time we are passing value 9, k minus 1. So again it would come here, then print the value 9 because k would be 9 now. So like this function would keep on executing till k is greater than 0. Okay, that's why we are getting all the print statements here. K is 10, k is 9 up to k is 1. And the thing that happens within recursive function is your results are getting created in the form of stack. Okay, so stack is last in first out structure in data structures, right? So that's why we would get the result printed in the reverse order. Okay, so here you can see the result that we are getting printed is the reverse order, because at the end k value would be 1, and then here we would pass 0, so 1 plus 0 would be 1. Then that's why we are getting the value 1 printed first, followed by 3, 6, so that 3 would be 1 plus 2, then 6 we are getting because 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6, so on till 1 adding 2 plus 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that total is 55. So at the end we are getting 55 printed over here. And we are able to then return the value within result variable, which is 55. And that's how we are able to get the final output as 55. So this is how we can use a recursive function for doing repetitive tasks. So remember that recursive function is a function which calls itself. That's it for today. I hope you got clarity on how to write Python functions. In next video, we would solve some problem statements using Python functions. So keep coding in Python and see you in the next video. Bye bye.